August 1942, Leningrad Front. The rumble was different. Soviet infantry, crouched in trenches outside MGA, whispered that it sounded like thunder rolling across the steppe. Then they saw it. Boxy, high-sided, with a snub-nosed 88 protruding like a spear. The Tiger rolled into combat for the first time, its thick frontal armor shrugging off the crack of 76.2mm Soviet shells. Crews who had survived the attrition of Kharkov and Stalingrad now spoke of a new beast, one immune to their fire. Within weeks, German propaganda had seized the story. The Panzerkampfwagen 6 Tiger was no mere tank. It was invincible, a steel fortress on tracks. In newsreels, Wehrmacht cameramen staged scenes of Tigers lumbering through mud, their 88mm KWK-36 gun blasting apart T-34s and KV-1s. To a Reich increasingly desperate for victories, the Tiger became both weapon and symbol. Allied intelligence took note. Through Soviet channels, Washington and London received alarming reports. A German tank whose armor reached 100mm thick, frontal plating impenetrable by anything short of heavy artillery. In London, the War Office circulated memoranda describing a new German heavy tank of exceptional resistance. In Washington, U.S. Army ordnance officers debated whether American armor could withstand such an adversary. The Americans had only recently introduced their own standard battle tank, the M4 Sherman. Fast, reliable, and easy to produce, it carried a 75mm M3 gun that had performed adequately in North Africa. But even in Tunisia, whispers began to spread. In February 1943, during the battles around Kasserine Pass, U.S. crews reported encounters with German Tigers attached to the 501st Heavy Panzer Battalion. After-action reports told a consistent story. Shermans fired multiple rounds at close range, only to see them ricochet. In some cases, German Tigers destroyed American tanks at over 1,000 yards, long before the Shermans' guns could reply effectively. Lieutenant John Waters, then serving with the 1st Armored Division, later recalled, "Our 75mm rounds bounced off the Tiger's front like pebbles against a stone wall. We were told no tank was invulnerable, but that was the day we began to wonder." At Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland, the U.S. Army's chief testing site, ordnance engineers worked feverishly to assess these reports. By spring 1943, fragments of German armor, captured in Tunisia and shipped secretly across the Atlantic, arrived at the range. Firing trials confirmed the worst fears. The 75mm gun of the Sherman was ineffective against heavy frontal plates. Only side or rear hits at dangerously close ranges offered a chance. The psychological impact was profound. Crews entered battle believing they were outmatched, that their standard weapon could not defeat the enemy's new champion. German soldiers, by contrast, spoke of their Tigers as unassailable. A captured diary from an officer of the 504th Heavy Panzer Battalion boasted, "No Allied gun can pierce us from the front. We go into battle with confidence." But behind the curtain of propaganda, cracks already existed. Soviet records from late 1942 noted Tiger losses not only from mechanical breakdowns, but also from concentrated anti-tank fire at close quarters. At Krasny Bor, Red Army gunners brought down Tigers by striking side plates with 76mm and 85mm fire. Still, these accounts were overshadowed by the Tiger's aura. By mid-1943, the United States faced a strategic dilemma. Would it continue to field the 75mm Sherman, adequate against Panzer IVs but dangerously outclassed by Tigers? Or would it risk delaying production to introduce a heavier gun? General Jacob Devers, head of the Army Ground Forces, pressed ordnance officials for answers. Reports from Tunisia were blunt. Unless a more powerful weapon was issued, American tank crews would face impossible odds. The Tiger had entered Allied consciousness as a myth, invulnerable, untouchable, beyond reach. What the Ordnance Department knew, though still classified, was that myths could be measured in steel thickness, slope, and velocity. The task now was to prove whether American science could pierce German legend. Spring 1943, Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland. The first slabs of Tiger armor arrived under armed guard, packed in wooden crates still marked with German stenciling. They had been cut from knocked-out tanks in Tunisia and shipped across the Atlantic, a prize almost as valuable as the code books seized from U-boats. To the engineers of the U.S. Ordnance Department, these dark gray plates were the enemy's secret revealed in steel. The tests began quietly. On the range, gunners fired the standard M61 APC armor-piercing capped, 75mm round at various angles. The results were disheartening. At 500 yards, impacts shattered harmlessly. At 1,000, they scarcely left a dent. Charts recorded ineffective, no penetration, ricochet. Major Paul Thompson, overseeing the trials, noted grimly, "The 75mm gun cannot be relied upon to defeat the German heavy tank at any practical range." But the Americans were not without options. Even before the Tiger's debut, ordnance specialists had been experimenting with a higher velocity weapon. The basis was an anti-aircraft gun, the 3-inch 1918, whose powerful cartridge offered much greater penetration. By reworking the breech and adapting it for a tank turret, engineers had created a prototype, the 76mm gun M1. When the Aberdeen crew switched to the new gun in their tests, results improved dramatically. Against side plates angled at 30 degrees, the 76mm round punched clean holes. Against 80mm armor, it scored partial penetrations at under 800 yards. Still, the Tiger's frontal plate remained an obstacle. Even the 76mm could not reliably pierce 100mm of face-hardened steel head-on.
To bridge the gap, ordnance officers tested new ammunition designs. One was the high-velocity armor-piercing round with a tungsten carbide core, HVAP. Fired from the 76mm at near 3,400 feet per second, HVAP could penetrate what standard steel-capped shot could not. In trials, it shattered through German plates that had deflected ordinary rounds. The problem was tungsten itself, scarce, expensive, and needed for machine tools as much as tank shells. The testing reports, stamped confidential, traveled swiftly to the Pentagon. In July 1943, General Leslie McNair, commander of Army Ground Forces, reviewed the data. He pressed his staff. Can this be ready for production in time for Europe? The answer from Aberdeen was cautious. The gun could be produced, but retooling assembly lines and modifying tank turrets would take months. Meanwhile, intelligence officers pieced together battlefield reports. From Soviet channels came accounts of Tigers disabled by flanking fire, by track hits, by close-range ambushes. From Tunisia, American units submitted sketches and range tables estimating at what angles the 75mm might still be useful. A pattern emerged. The Tiger was strong, but not invulnerable. Side armor, rear plates, and mantlet joints offered weaknesses. Inside ordnance offices, debates grew heated. Some argued the Sherman's 75mm was good enough, pointing to its effectiveness against the more common Panzer IV. Others countered that Tiger encounters, though relatively rare, were so psychologically devastating that failing to answer them risked morale collapse. One colonel warned bluntly, "If our crews believe their weapons useless, we risk losing battles before they begin." In September 1943, the matter reached the highest levels. General George C. Marshall reviewed ordnance memoranda and approved an accelerated program to equip future Shermans with the 76mm. The decision was deliberately kept quiet. Public acknowledgement might spread panic among troops already fearful of German armor. Instead, the directive circulated as a classified order, All resources necessary to perfect and field the 76mm were to be allocated without delay. Aberdeen continued to hammer away at Tiger steel. Charts filled with impact data, penetration curves, and velocity tables. The numbers told a sobering truth. There was no magic bullet. But, combined with new ammunition, tactical doctrine, and sheer numerical superiority, the Sherman could stand a chance. The Tiger's aura of invincibility was already beginning to crack, not from battlefield glory, but from controlled test ranges and the cold arithmetic of ordnance science. For the men in Maryland, each hole punched through German armor was more than a technical result. It was proof that the myth could be broken, and that American crews would not be asked to fight blind against a giant. October 1943, Washington, D.C.
In a secure conference room at the Pentagon, ordnance officers laid out their findings. On the polished table rested fragments of German armor, scarred, pitted, and drilled with test impacts. Charts detailed angles of penetration, ranges, and probabilities of kill. The conclusion was clear. The Sherman's 75mm was no longer sufficient. General Jacob Devers, Chief of Army Ground Forces, leaned forward as the engineers explained. The Tiger's armor was too heavy for current U.S. weapons. Only the experimental 76mm gun, rushed through trials at Aberdeen, offered a credible answer. Devers turned to General Leslie McNair. "If we wait, our crews will be outgunned. We need a directive, and we need it now." Within days, a classified order circulated through the War Department. It authorized accelerated production of the 76mm gun M1, approved modification of Sherman turrets, and directed priority use of scarce tungsten for HVAP rounds. The document, stamped secret, left no doubt. Defeating the Tiger was a matter of national urgency. The order bypassed normal bureaucratic delays. Ordnance engineers were instructed to proceed without regard to cost and to coordinate directly with Lockheed, Chrysler, and Fisher body plants, retooling for the new guns. In the words of one memorandum, the Panzerkampfwagen 6th must be met in kind. American armor must not go into battle believing itself inferior. But not everyone agreed. Tank commanders in Italy argued that Tigers were rare and that most German units still fielded Panzer IVs or self-propelled guns. General Omar Bradley, reviewing the order in Algiers, worried about logistics. "Every time we change calibers, we complicate supply." His staff feared that diverting resources to the 76mm might slow overall Sherman output. Still, the psychological weight of the Tiger loomed large. Combat interviews from Tunisia made their way to Washington. One Sherman gunner had confessed, "It doesn't matter how many we have, if one Tiger shows up, everyone gets nervous." That was enough for Marshall and Eisenhower, both keenly aware that morale could decide battles as surely as armor thickness. At the same time, U.S. intelligence expanded its effort to understand German design philosophy. Captured technical manuals, some smuggled from Soviet archives, confirmed thickness measurements, 100mm frontal plate, 80mm sides. These numbers matched Aberdeen's test data. Analysts concluded that while the Tiger was formidable, it was not invulnerable, especially if engaged with high-velocity weapons and flanking maneuvers. The secret order did more than approve a new gun. It reshaped doctrine. Training manuals quietly revised their sections on anti-armor tactics. Crews were instructed to work in teams, to outflank heavy tanks rather than engage head-on, and to use terrain to their advantage. Behind the scenes, instructors drilled home a message. With the 76mm and proper maneuver, you can kill a Tiger.
Meanwhile, industry responded. At Chrysler's Detroit Arsenal tank plant, engineers worked double shifts modifying Sherman turrets to accept the longer 76mm barrel. Photographs from late 1943 show workers guiding gun tubes into place, sparks flying from welding torches as new mantlets were fitted. Each tank represented not just steel and machinery, but reassurance for the crews who would ride them into France. In November, a second classified directive extended the program. Priority shipments of HVAP ammunition were to be allocated first to units expected to face German armor in Normandy. Though production of tungsten cores lagged, the intention was clear. American gunners would not be left helpless against the Tiger's frontal shield. The secrecy surrounding these orders was deliberate. Public acknowledgement of the Tiger's superiority might embolden German propaganda and demoralize U.S. troops. Instead, the War Department presented the 76mm Sherman as a natural evolution, an improvement, not a desperate necessity. Only within the restricted files of ordnance and intelligence did the truth circulate. This was a race to neutralize a weapon that symbolized German battlefield dominance. By the end of 1943, the myth of invincibility was already under assault. It had begun not with tank duels in Normandy, but with memoranda drafted in Washington, test rounds fired in Maryland, and classified orders signed in secret. The Tiger would meet its challenger not by accident of battle, but by deliberate design, an American promise forged in urgency and sealed with steel. June 1944, Normandy hedgerows. The first Sherman 76mm tanks rolled ashore at Utah Beach, their long-barreled guns a visual contrast to the stubby 75s that had carried U.S. armor since North Africa. Crews were told little about the classified directives that had accelerated their production. What they knew was simple. This new gun was supposed to give them a fighting chance against the German heavyweights rumored to be waiting beyond the beaches. By late June, reports filtered in from the Bocage country. The 2nd and 3rd Armored Divisions, pushing through tangled hedgerows, faced not only Panzer IVs, but also Panthers and the occasional Tiger I. For many crews, it was their first encounter with German heavy armor. Lieutenant Charles Bodges, commanding a 76mm Sherman of the 743rd Tank Battalion, remembered the nerves before his first engagement. The briefing said our new guns could take on any German tank. When you actually saw a Tiger through the foliage, the words sounded thinner than paper. The initial duels told a complex story. At 800 yards, a 76mm round slammed into the glacis plate of a Tiger near Villers-Bocage. The impact sparked and ricocheted away, leaving only a scorch mark. The Sherman crew fired again, then again, each shot bouncing. Moments later, the Tiger's 88 roared and the American tank brewed up in flames. Survivors staggered away, shaken not only by the loss, but by the seeming futility of their weapon.
Yet other reports contradicted this despair. Near Saint-Lô, a 76mm Sherman maneuvered behind a Tiger stuck in mud. At less than 400 yards, its HVAP round tore through the side armor, igniting ammunition. The Tiger burned until nightfall. Its destruction logged in the after-action report as first confirmed kill by 76mm against Panzer VI. Such accounts highlighted the paradox of the new gun. Against frontal armor, the Tiger remained a daunting opponent, but the 76mm gave U.S. crews the possibility, through flanking shots, close-range ambushes, or HVAP ammunition, of knocking out even the heaviest German tanks. For men who had once believed themselves powerless, this possibility mattered. By July 1944, combat interviews gathered by 13th Corps revealed a gradual shift in morale. One sergeant admitted, "Before, we thought if a Tiger showed up, the battle was already lost. Now we know if we keep our heads and work together, we can beat it." The British were conducting parallel experiments. Their Firefly, armed with the 17-pounder gun, scored dramatic kills against Tigers in Normandy, reinforcing the idea that even the strongest German armor was not beyond reach. The American 76mm, though not as powerful, benefited from these shared lessons. Flanking fire, teamwork, and patience replaced panic. German records captured after the war confirmed Tiger losses in Normandy, some to artillery and airstrikes, others to mines and breakdowns, but also a handful to 76mm Shermans. A war diary from the 101st Heavy Panzer Battalion noted grimly in July, "Enemy fire from new long-barreled Shermans penetrated side armor at close ranges.
2 Tigers lost. Still, frustrations remained. HVAP ammunition was scarce, rationed mostly to tank destroyer units. Many Sherman crews entered battle with only standard APC rounds, knowing that unless they achieved flank shots, their chances against a Tiger were slim. Letters home reflect the mixture of pride and resentment. They gave us the new gun, but not enough of the shells that make it worth carrying. Normandy proved the 76mm was no miracle weapon. It could not erase the technical superiority of German heavy armor, nor could it protect crews from the terrifying punch of the 88. But it represented something equally vital: proof that American industry and science had not sent their soldiers into battle without hope. For every Sherman that burned in the bocage, another managed to fight back, to chip away at the myth of invincibility. By the end of July 1944, Tiger crews themselves wrote with less certainty, noting that Allied fire was becoming more dangerous, their own losses harder to dismiss as accidents or flukes. July 1944, captured German maintenance depot, Normandy.
For the first time, U.S. Army Ordnance officers examined an intact Tiger I abandoned by its crew. Unlike burned-out wrecks, this vehicle still held its secrets: thick welded armor, the massive 88mm KWK-36 gun, overlapping road wheels, and mechanical systems, both advanced and fragile. The encounter gave American analysts their first real chance to measure what their tank crews were up against. The numbers spoke volumes. The Tiger's frontal glacis armor measured 100mm at a nearly vertical angle. Side plates were 80mm. By comparison, the 76mm Sherman gun, firing standard armor-piercing rounds, could penetrate about 92mm at 500 yards, but only under ideal conditions. Against the Tiger's frontal armor, penetration was nearly impossible at battlefield ranges. Against side plates, however, the odds shifted. With HVAP rounds, penetration at 800 yards became achievable. Captured German reports revealed their own awareness of these vulnerabilities. The 101st Heavy Panzer Battalion noted, "Sherman with long gun, dangerous to sides and rear. Caution in village fighting." For all the Tiger's strengths, it was not invincible. Crews who fought in Tigers remembered both confidence and dread. In post-war interrogations, Lieutenant Otto Karius, one of the most famous Tiger commanders, described the mixed feelings. "We knew our armor could withstand many hits, but we also knew our tank was heavy, slow to maneuver in mud, and once flanked, we were finished." The Tiger's reputation had grown out of early successes on the Eastern Front, where Soviet T-34s and KV-1s struggled to defeat it. By the time it faced Shermans in Normandy, however, the battlefield had changed. Allied air power prowled overhead, artillery barrages disrupted movements, and fuel shortages limited German maneuvers. A Tiger could dominate a duel, but surviving long enough to reach that duel was another matter. Inside, conditions were less glorious than propaganda suggested. The Tiger's interior was cramped despite its size, with 5 men packed around ammunition racks and mechanical systems. Ventilation was poor, leaving fumes lingering after each shot. The overlapping road wheel system, though designed for better weight distribution, trapped mud and froze solid in winter. Maintenance crews often spent more hours repairing Tigers than they did fighting in them. American ordnance officers noted these flaws with interest. A classified 1944 report concluded, "The Tiger tank represents an over-engineered vehicle. While tactically formidable, it is mechanically unreliable and unsustainable at scale." The most important discovery was psychological, not mechanical. When U.S. tankers learned that even German officers admitted the Tiger had weaknesses, confidence began to spread. Training manuals incorporated captured information. Flank the Tiger, force it into ambushes, target its fuel-hungry logistics. At the same time, Sherman crews respected the threat. The sight of a Tiger in a hedgerow could still paralyze a platoon. Gunners whispered about its invulnerable front. Commanders dreaded the first thunderous crack of its 88. Yet behind this aura lay reality. A Tiger required 3 gallons of fuel for every mile, broke down frequently, and could not be replaced as quickly as the Allies built Shermans. By August 1944, U.S. forces captured additional damaged Tigers. Firing tests conducted at the Aberdeen Proving Ground confirmed the field experience. Standard 76mm rounds failed against the glassy. HVAP rounds could pierce the side armor at 600 to 800 yards. At closer ranges, even the Tiger's front mantlet became vulnerable. These results were circulated through armored divisions, sometimes quietly, sometimes exaggerated into confidence-boosting briefings. The paradox sharpened. The Tiger was terrifying, but also a liability to its own army. Allied intelligence noted that while every Tiger destroyed an average of 5 to 10 Shermans, each Tiger lost was irreplaceable. American factories could deliver hundreds of new tanks in the time it took Germany to build a handful of heavy machines. The battlefield arithmetic was against the Tiger from the start. In combat interviews years later, American tankers recalled this turning point. "We stopped seeing the Tiger as a monster," one veteran of the 4th Armored Division explained. "It was just another tank. Tough, yes, but not magic. If you worked together, if you kept your nerve, you could beat it." The Tiger's mythology endured long after its mechanical reality was exposed. But for those who fought in 76mm Shermans, knowledge gained from captured examples changed everything. They learned that the Tiger's armor was not an impenetrable wall, its gun not an unstoppable hammer, its presence not a death sentence. It was a powerful machine, but one that could bleed, break, and burn. The legend remained, but the fear began to fade. Autumn 1944. Allied Ordnance Board, London. Colonel John J. Madaris studied the briefing papers on his desk with unease. Reports from Normandy were clear. The 76mm Sherman gun was effective, but only if supplied with scarce HVAP ammunition. Without it, crews faced the Tiger and Panther at a steep disadvantage. The problem was that HVAP, or high-velocity armor-piercing shells, relied on tungsten carbide cores, and tungsten was as precious as gold. HVAP rounds represented a leap in ballistic science. Unlike standard armor-piercing shells, which relied on sheer steel mass and velocity, HVAP used a dense tungsten penetrator encased in a lightweight alloy body. Fired from the 76mm gun, the lighter projectile accelerated faster, reaching higher velocities. On impact, the tungsten core concentrated force into a smaller area, punching through thicker armor than conventional steel could manage.
Test results dazzled. At 500 yards, HVAP could penetrate nearly 150 millimeters of armor, enough to breach even the Tiger's side plates and threaten the Panther's glossus under favorable angles. Ordnance officers scribbled in the margins, "Finally, a true counter to heavy German armor." But the mathematics of war told another story. The United States produced Shermans by the tens of thousands. Each required dozens of shells to stay combat ready. Yet the global supply of tungsten was limited, sourced mainly from mines in China, Burma, and Portugal. Diverting tungsten to tank shells meant less for machine tools, armor-piercing aircraft rounds, and industrial cutting instruments. Every HVAP shell manufactured was a strategic decision. German intelligence faced the same problem. The Wehrmacht's Panzergranat 40 APCR rounds also used tungsten. By 1943, shortages forced them to reserve these shells for critical situations. In a twist of irony, German tankers often complained that their Tiger guns lacked tungsten ammunition, while Americans whispered the same about their Shermans. On the battlefield, scarcity shaped tactics. U.S. armored units sometimes received only a handful of HVAP rounds per tank, 5, perhaps 10. Commanders instructed crews to save them for the most dangerous targets. Don't waste it on a half-track. Keep it for the Panther. Veterans later remembered these orders vividly, the tense moment when the loader reached for the single HVAP shell left in the rack, knowing it might be their only chance. One gunner wrote, "We carried our tungsten rounds like treasure. You prayed the Tiger would show its side. Then you'd let it fly, and for once you felt the odds even." Back in Washington, debates raged. Should HVAP production be ramped up, diverting tungsten from industry? Or was it better to rely on mass Sherman production, accepting losses, but overwhelming German armor with numbers? Ultimately, the U.S. chose compromise. Enough HVAP was shipped to keep morale alive, but never enough to arm every Sherman fully. The gamble was that logistics, air power, and sheer quantity would carry the day, not tungsten cores. The Germans noticed. Reports from Panzer commanders in late 1944 warned enemy 76mm gun with special ammunition dangerous at medium range. Avoid exposing side armor. For the first time, the Tiger no longer seemed untouchable. The aura of invincibility cracked not because every Sherman had HVAP, but because any Sherman might. Yet scarcity produced tension even among Allied crews. Tankers envied units lucky enough to receive generous allotments. Others grumbled bitterly when their supply held nothing but standard rounds. A captain in the 3rd Armored Division recalled, "We went into battle never knowing if we had the magic bullets or not. Sometimes we did. Sometimes it was just steel against steel." Strategists looking beyond Europe already eyed Japan. Tungsten would be needed for the Pacific War as well. The hard truth remained. The HVAP round was a technological marvel chained by resource limits.
Still, even in limited numbers, it changed the psychological balance. Knowing that the Tiger could be killed, even if only by a rare, glittering tungsten dart, lifted morale. Tankers no longer felt condemned to hopeless duels. They had a fighting chance, however slim. And in war, sometimes a chance was all that mattered. The HVAP gamble did not win the war by itself, but it gave U.S. crews something priceless: belief that their 76mm gun could bring down the giants of the battlefield. January 1945, Western Front. The Ardennes offensive had stalled. German panzers, starved of fuel and hammered by Allied air power, left behind wrecks in the snow. American ordnance teams prowled battlefields, examining shattered Panthers and Tigers. The question lingered: how had the Allies, with weapons often seen as inferior on paper, managed to blunt and finally reverse Germany's armored spearheads? The answer lay not only in firepower, but in numbers. The Tiger I, weighing 57 tons, mounted the fearsome 88mm KWK-36 gun. In defensive ambush, it could destroy Shermans at 2,000 yards. Yet by 1944-45, Tiger battalions were rare, sometimes mustering fewer than 20 serviceable tanks. Mechanical breakdowns and fuel shortages reduced their battlefield presence even further. The Sherman, by contrast, was everywhere. By war's end, more than 49,000 had rolled off U.S. production lines. Even if a Sherman fell to a Tiger, another stood ready. As one German tanker admitted in post-war interrogation, "We destroyed many, but there were always more. We could not kill them all." Numbers did not tell the whole story. Logistics magnified the imbalance. The U.S. Army ensured that losses could be replaced rapidly. Units mauled in combat often received fresh Shermans within days. German crews, on contrast, might wait weeks for a replacement Tiger, if one came at all. A single broken track or clogged fuel line could render their prized heavy tanks useless. Allied commanders adapted doctrine accordingly. They no longer expect a lone Sherman to duel a Tiger on equal terms. Instead, they relied on coordination, swarming attacks, artillery support, and airstrikes. A Panther crew might knock out 2 Shermans, but when the 3rd, 4th, and 5th advanced under covering fire, the calculus shifted. Statistics from Normandy were revealing. U.S. armored divisions often reported loss ratios of 3 or 4 Shermans per German heavy tank destroyed. At first glance, this seemed disastrous.
Yet replacements filled the gaps so quickly that division strength remained intact. By contrast, each German loss was irreplaceable. The battlefield equation favored the side that could endure attrition. The Tiger's reputation also carried hidden costs. Its complexity demanded constant maintenance. Crews devoted as much time to repairing engines and gearboxes as to fighting. American crews, while frustrated by the Sherman's thinner armor, benefited from its reliability. A tank that started every morning, even if modestly armed, mattered more than a machine stranded in the repair depot. There was also a psychological shift. By late 1944, U.S. tankers began to understand the broader picture. A sergeant in the 4th Armored Division wrote, "Sure, the Krautcats were tough, but for every one of theirs, we had a dozen. We knew if we kept pushing, they'd run out first." Confidence came not from individual duels, but from faith in the system behind them. Factories, convoys, supply dumps. German accounts echoed the despair. A Panther commander near Cologne recalled seeing endless columns of Shermans, comparing the sight to waves at sea. Even if he destroyed several, his gun barrel overheated, ammunition dwindled, and his crew grew exhausted. The enemy's strength was not the single tank in front of him, but the inexhaustible stream behind it. The 76mm gun, especially with HVAP, played its part. It gave individual crews the possibility of victory in direct combat. But the strategic truth was starker. Sheer American numbers ground down German quality. Tigers and Panthers were predators. Shermans were a swarm. Historians at the U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey later concluded that German armored warfare collapsed less from battlefield defeat than from logistical suffocation. Tanks without fuel, factories without tungsten, railroads under air attack, all made the quality edge meaningless. In the final months, even the most formidable Tiger II became little more than a static bunker, abandoned when gasoline ran out. Thus, the real weapon that pierced the Tiger's armor was not just the 76mm shell. It was the relentless tide of production, the Allied ability to absorb losses and keep fighting when Germany could not. Numbers overwhelmed quality, until even the mighty Tiger became a stranded relic of a strategy the Reich could no longer sustain. May 1945, the guns fell silent in Europe. What remained was memory, testimony, and wreckage. Among the hulks scattered across fields and forests, one debate lingered. Had the Sherman's 76mm gun truly been enough against the Tiger, or had victory come despite it? In interrogation rooms across occupied Germany, Allied officers pressed captured Wehrmacht tankers for insight. Many confirmed what American crews had long suspected. The Tiger was feared, but its reputation exceeded its battlefield presence. A former Tiger commander from Schwere Panzerabteilung 503 confessed, "The tank was strong, yes, but there were too few. Against your artillery, air, and endless tanks, it was a fight already lost." German reports admitted that the 76mm HVAP round could defeat a Tiger under the right conditions. More troubling for the Wehrmacht was the psychological effect. Knowing that any Sherman might carry the tungsten-core round eroded confidence. We no longer assumed safety. We had to maneuver as if every enemy gun could pierce us. It slowed us, made us cautious. In American circles, post-war reviews were more pragmatic. The U.S. Army's Operations Research Section compiled combat records. Their conclusion? The 76mm gun was not universally effective against German heavy armor, but when combined with superior logistics and numbers, it was adequate. The Sherman was never meant to duel Tigers in isolation, one report stated. It was designed to operate as part of a combined arms team. Veterans' voices added nuance. At reunions in the 1950s and 1960s, Sherman crews recalled both frustration and pride. Some lamented the losses incurred when facing German heavies. Others emphasized reliability and speed. A gunner from the 2nd Armored Division summarized it simply. We cursed her thin armor, but she got us there and back. That counted for more than people remember. Historians later framed the debate as one of perception versus strategy. To soldiers inside a Sherman, staring down an 88mm barrel, the imbalance felt overwhelming. To generals and logisticians, however, the Sherman embodied the American way of war. Standardized, mass-produced, dependable, good enough. The 76mm gun's penetration figures mattered less than the certainty that another Sherman would be delivered tomorrow. The German side, too, wrestled with post-war reflection. At the 1962 U.S.-Japanese-German Symposium on Armored Warfare, a former Wehrmacht colonel admitted, "Our mistake was believing in technical superiority as a substitute for numbers. The Tiger inspired awe, but awe cannot hold ground when the fuel runs out." Later studies reinforced this view. The U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey noted that by 1945, German production of heavy tanks was crippled by resource shortages. Even if the Tiger had been invulnerable, there were never enough to alter the tide. The Sherman 76mm, especially with limited HVAP, was good enough to contribute materially to success. Popular culture complicated the story. Films and memoirs often glorified the Tiger's dominance, portraying Shermans as underdogs. This narrative, while compelling, overlooked the broader truth. No weapon exists in isolation. The 76mm gun was one component in an ecosystem of artillery, airstrikes, and supply lines that ultimately crushed the German war machine. By the 1980s, at veterans' reunions in Hawaii and Normandy, former foes occasionally met. Over drinks, they compared memories. A Sherman commander recalled firing his precious HVAP round into a Tiger's flank near Bastogne. A German tanker nodded, admitting he had abandoned his machine when fuel ran dry. Both agreed the outcome had less to do with any single shell than with the industrial weight behind it. Thus, the post-war assessments converged. The 76mm gun, with all its limitations, had done its job. It pierced Tiger armor in specific cases, boosted morale, and symbolized the ingenuity of adapting a mass-produced tank to face a formidable enemy. But ultimate victory came from the system that delivered Shermans in endless numbers, kept them supplied, and allowed crews to keep fighting day after day. The Sherman versus Tiger debate would continue for decades, in books, museums, and movies. Yet veterans on both sides understood the deeper truth. Wars are not won by the thickness of armor or the caliber of a gun alone. They are won by the sustained ability to fight, supply, and adapt. In that contest, the 76mm Sherman proved more than enough.